Thank you to those who made this event possible. What I'm presenting today is the result of collaborative work with Anne Junier, Laure Lansary and Émilie Lotte, who are all part of this of the team in the Amphiline project. What I'm going to present here is a study from a linguistic point of view. In linguistics, surprise in itself is not a concept that can be dealt with in an immediate way, but in some languages there exists a grammatical category that encodes surprise, surprise and new knowledge, and this category is called Mirativity. Eichenwald defines Mirativity as a category that covers the speaker's unprepared mind, unexpected new information, and concomitant surprise. In the languages that have a Mirativity system, there exists a morpheme or a particle that is marked morphologically, and it is not optional, it is obligatory, it has to be marked as such in the morphology of the language. So in these languages, Mirativity is encoded grammatically, and this is not the case in English or French, for example. In English or French, what we have are lexical items to refer to a surprising event. Intonation may also mark surprise, but there is no grammatical system encoding surprise. If we take the example, a famous example given by Delancey, which you can read on the screen, you can say that, well, there are two ways of understanding I have some money. You may be aware of money in your pocket, and if you need some money, well, you know that you have that money available because you know that you took money with you, and the particle that will be used in this case is yod, and in the other case, that is, if you realize that you have some money, but you had forgotten that there was some money in your pocket, and you suddenly realize that there is money in your pocket, well, in Tibetan you will have to introduce another particle, dag. Well, I don't know how to pronounce it, but it's obligatory. It's not something that is optional, but you have to make that choice. For the present study, given that English doesn't have such a system, we decided not to go into Mirativity itself, but to select surprise lexemes, surprise as a noun in English, and the adjective surprised. Both are lexical items supposed to encode surprise in English. What I'm going to do today is first deal with theoretical issues. For a linguist, how is it possible to analyze surprise? Then I'll introduce my data and the method that we have used. Then I will go into the ambiguity between a stimulus reading and a stative reading, Well, the question that will be raised is, are stimulus and state relevant parameters for the analysis of surprise and surprised as lexemes? Then we'll put forward a new semantic model and suggest a pragmatic analysis for the adjective surprised. As it has probably become clear since yesterday, there is no consensus on the emotional status of surprise. For Ekman, surprise is the briefest emotion before it merges into fear, amusement, relief, anger, disgust, and so forth. Ortonian colleagues argue that surprise disqualifies as an emotion because surprise can arise in the absence of a balanced reaction. Stein and Hernandez view surprise as a general affective response, but not as an emotion. So, how can a linguist detect surprise, especially in a language such as English, a language which does not have a mirative system? What we can tell from our data is that there is a discrepancy between the reaction of surprise and the linguistic expression of surprise. Surprise, well, it is something that manifests itself physiologically in a startle, but linguistically, this may coincide with silence, with laughter, and it is often followed by spontaneous interjections, questions, and exclamative sentences. So how can a linguist detect surprise? I think that the best way to detect surprise is to look at disfluencies and signs of discontinuity in the syntax of dialogue. Blanks are important for a study of surprise. And after the blank, there's a shift in the type of utterance, a shift to questions, a shift to exclamative sentences, reformulations, repetitions, interjections. And the use of modality is evidence of surprise. Modal auxiliaries, for example. If you look at the example that you have on the screen, the contracts in my desk are fake. I mailed them to myself. What? Why would you do that? Would here is a modal that indicates that the speaker is adopting a different epistemic stance as a result of something surprising. And by the way, the modal distancing that we have here with the modal would may, well, to some extent, be compared with evidentials and mirative markers in other languages. So the modal here, why would you do that, is typical of evidentiality and related to mirative markers in other languages. But the use of the adjective surprised does not reflect an emotional reaction, but rather an emotive one. And here I'm making a distinction which originally was made by Marty, and a distinction that is reprised by Kafi and Jani between emotional communication and emotive communication. The use of the adjective surprised does not reflect an emotional reaction. Well, maybe I should tell you more about Marty's definition of emotional reaction, emotional communication. According to Marty, emotional communication is a type of spontaneous, unintentional leakage or bursting out of emotion in speech, as opposed to emotive communication, which Marty says has no automatic or necessary relation to real inner affective states. Rather, it is related to self-presentation, and it is inherently strategic, persuasive, interactional, and other directed by its very nature. We argue that the emotive function of surprise lexemes is pragmatically exploited by speakers in verbal interaction. And the noun surprise, in the same way as the adjective surprised, tend to be used to simulate a reaction of surprise, but do not express spontaneous reaction of surprise. Clearly, if a water surprise, for example, which you have on the screen, is ironic because an exercise of politics in Washington is not surprising at all. And similarly, in the second example, the truth value of the proposition containing the adjectival phrase is contradicted by Paul's facial expression. I bet you're angry. No, you're furious. I can see that. I can see it all over your face. So here, clearly, facial expressions may be evidence of a spontaneous emotional reaction, but the language construct of emotion seems to be at odds with reality. The speaker is trying not to disclose his reaction of anger, and admitting surprise instead of anger is a way of minimizing his reaction. So language is not a reality replica, but a reality representation, which poses a problem for treating the linguistic expression of emotions. Emotions, as such, are outside the scope of linguistics insofar as language offers only indirect access to them. However, even if language mediation distorts emotion, we agree with Plantin that emotion is a burning topic for a linguist. The way an emotion is concealed or disclosed is meaningful, and speakers may argue about emotions because emotions do matter in any verbal interaction. The starting point for a linguist is necessarily linguistic evidence, words. Bodily and facial reactions may play a role, as we have just seen, but basically linguists are concerned with what speakers express verbally. It is also relevant for a linguist to try and solve linguistic riddles, such as the pleonasm that we have here. Two would-be robbers got an unexpected surprise. Why did the CNN journalists feel the need to attribute the property unexpected to the noun surprise, given that unexpectedness is normally already encoded in the noun surprise. Now let me move on to the data and the method that we have used. According to Biber, Conrad and Reppen, there are two main trends in linguistics: the study of language structure and the study of language use. Traditional linguistics tends to be concerned with the description of language structure, while corpus linguistics is defined as the study of language based on examples of real-life language use. We have adopted a corpus-based method, which means that in the long run, the goal for this research is to acquire the four characteristics of corpus linguistics as defined by Biber and colleagues, to focus on the actual patterns of use in natural texts. The study has to be corpus-based, corpus being defined as a large and principled collection of natural texts. It should be computer-based, and we have to use quantitative and qualitative methods. At present, our sample is not large enough to allow us to draw quantitative conclusions, at least quantitative conclusions that can be generalized. The data was partly encoded on an Excel file, but systematic annotation remains to be added to the sample. So far, we have analyzed the collocation pattern of the noun surprise in the whole COCA corpus. The COCA corpus is the corpus of contemporary American English. It's the largest freely available corpus of American English, and it's equally divided among spoken language, fiction, popular magazines, newspapers, and academic texts. So it includes 20 million words each year from 1990 to 2012. And the interface allows searching for words, specific words and phrases, lemmas, parts of speech, or a combination of these. And surrounding words, collocates, can also be searched for. For example, we can look for all the adjectives or verbs which occur in the environment of surprise as a noun or as an adjective, so we can know which words are, well, the best friends of surprise. We carried out a query of the noun surprise in the spoken subcorpus. The word can be analyzed in an extended context, since the concordance line provides 80 words before and after the word searched for. Our quantitative hypotheses on the noun surprise are based on this corpus, and then we tried to validate these hypotheses by conducting a qualitative analysis. So we found more than 22,000 occurrences of the noun surprise in the COCA corpus, and 4,500 in the COCA spoken. And for this study, for this preliminary study, we focused on the analysis of the first 200 occurrences of the noun surprise in the COCA spoken subpart. The majority of our examples are drawn from US TV broadcast, so what we have is real, authentic use of very recent spoken English. And all the occurrences were exported to an Excel file and encoded. So our data was encoded on the basis of Plantin's definition of emotional utterances. Plantin argues that an emotional utterance combines a series of 4 parameters. In fact, Plantin's definition of emotional utterances is inspired by Scherer, a psychologist, and Caffey and Janney. Caffey and Janney view pragmatics as the place where psychology and linguistics could finally and fruitfully meet, partly through the medium of rhetoric. Plantin's parameters concur with those put forward by Caffey and Janney. For example, parameter 4, having an attributor, corresponds to control, potency, power in Caffey and Janney's terminology. And in addition to these parameters, we felt the need to encode another parameter in order to analyze the noun surprise. It seemed important to us to be able to indicate whether surprise is used with a referential or a predicative function as a noun. So we added this feature in the encoding. The data sample that we have used for the study of the adjective is made up of dialogue sequences drawn from novels and from the first 3 seasons of the American series In Treatment. The results are checked against the figures obtained from much larger corpus, the corpus of American soap operas. The Casso corpus is a genre and a register-related text corpus, but a quantitatively much larger one. And In Treatment is a drama about a psychologist involved in weekly sessions with patients. So in this way, it was possible for us to have in our corpus data which are in a way similar to other types of data also used in the project. So verbal interaction is really part of a therapy in this series, in treatment. So it's a therapy in which patients discuss personal issues and interpersonal conflicts with their therapist, and in this way they hope that they will uncover problems and repair relationships. Interestingly, the patient-therapist relationship grows very complex in the course of the therapy, and at some points the therapist's self-doubt jeopardizes his position as a resolution expert. The corpus provides evidence that emotion is something that is very dynamic. Emotion moves in intersubjectivity and in dialogue. Our aim was not to examine the role of language well, it was to examine the role of language in this emotion process, but more specifically, the focus was on first and second person utterances in the present tense, with a copular verb such as I am surprised, you are surprised, you sound surprised, but only first and second person utterances, only utterances in the present, because in these utterances the emotive reaction involved is current as opposed to reported, and it's a reaction which may be asserted, inferred, questioned, depending on the person and the type of utterance. Reported emotive reactions in third person or past tense utterances were deliberately left aside in order to focus on current and, well, supposedly emotional reactions. But by narrowing our focus, we hope to show that even current reactions expressed in direct utterances may serve an argumentative or strategic function. The noun surprise is traditionally analyzed as a stative psychological noun. Barque, Fabregas, and Marin stress that some psychological nouns may be interpreted in a different way. They may designate an entity that functions as a stimulus or a cause of the psychological state denoted by the noun. In the case of surprise, the stimulus reading is associated with surprise as a count noun when you find a surprise. And on the other hand, the stative reading is associated with surprise as a mass noun, surprise, not a surprise. Following Plantin, we prefer not to use the term stimulus, but to use the term source instead, because we regard the expression of emotion as a language construct, not as the reflection of a mechanical reaction to a stimulus. In addition, the source of surprise is not limited to unexpected situations that the speaker finds surprising. Some event that both speaker and addressee are well aware of may also come as a surprise if the reason for that event is surprising to one of them. According to Plantin, what triggers emotion is not an event in itself, but an event under some perception, linguistically under some description. So emotion conflicts resulting from representation conflicts give credence to this position. So we made a distinction between surprise as a source, I'm using source instead of stimulus, and surprise as a state. Three parameters help distinguish between the two meanings: collocations, information structure, scope and form of negation. The stative reading of the noun surprise is not dominant. In the sample that we analyzed, we found 3 times as much stimulus source occurrences as stative occurrences. So the noun is mainly used predicatively, and fixed phrases are relevant. And among the fixed phrases that we found element of surprise, 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 a bit of a surprise, no surprise. The emotion attributor seems to coincide with the experiencer in a significant way. A qualitative analysis of the first 200 occurrences of the noun surprise confirms this tendency. So we really found some regularities. Let's move on to information structure. As a stative noun, surprise often appears in an interpolated clause, as here, to Beth's surprise, for example, as a background commentary on the foreground information presented in the main clause. When surprise designates a stimulus, a source, it often precedes the description of its referent. Charlie, I've got a big surprise for you. As an addressee, you expect some information about this surprise. So the noun precedes the description of its referent, and since it does not have a stable referent, the referent may be a concert, a party, a dinner in a restaurant. It creates an iconic expectation of the event itself. The addressee is expecting a description or a designation of the referent in a particular extralinguistic situation. Now, let's turn to negation. We found several negative forms in the corpus with different scopes depending on the meaning of surprise. We found 6 occurrences of not a surprise, 22 occurrences of no surprise, and this confirms our hypothesis that the count noun is associated with a source, a stimulus, whereas the mass noun is associated with a state. The uses of surprise combined with a negative form are mainly predicative, and only one occurrence out of 28 negative forms is analyzed as referential, but there's no surprise at that. In the source readings, the negation of the noun surprise does not deny the source itself. What is denied is that the source should be categorized as a surprising event. This, if you look at the example here, this refers to his not outlawing all regulations. So that Romney is not against any kind of regulations is not denied. What is denied is the fact that this should be surprising information. And in the second example, it wasn't a surprise, but it was a joy. Norm Lewis plays Porgy. It operates cataphorically, its referent being Norm Lewis plays Porgy. So this information is first categorized as surprising, the big surprise for us, and this categorization is then denied. It wasn't a surprise. Eventually, a different interpretation is assigned to the event. It was a joy. But the existence of the event is not denied, but it's conceptualization as a surprise-provoking event is negotiated. The existence of a source is not denied either in the case of stative interpretations. Negation here, in the last example, has scope over the effect that is produced. It is claimed that there was no state of surprise after Bohner's declaration. The most striking observation in our corpus is the high number of examples where it is difficult or even impossible to decide between a source reading or a stative reading. The distinction between count nouns and mass nouns is an indication, but it is not a sufficient criterion to distinguish between the two possible meanings of the noun in context. Our qualitative analysis shows that a sentence may be understood even if the meaning of surprise is not quite clear. 65 occurrences out of 200 were difficult or impossible to disambiguate. I think that three sources of ambiguity can be identified: predicative and verbless uses, performative uses, and the presence of modifiers, complements, possessives. The predicative uses amount to a little more than 100 occurrences out of 200. The first example here is typical of the predicative use. It seemed like a surprise. As Francis points out, the usual function of a noun phrase is that of an argument, not of a predicate. Noun phrases are prototypically referential. They may refer to a participant, to an action, to a situation. However, noun phrases may have predicative uses. And the use of surprise as the first noun in a compound, surprise lunch, for example, surprise lunch, surprise visit, surprise guest, also serves a predicative function. And so does the use of surprise in verbless sentences, big surprise. Drawing upon Lefebvre, we argue that verbless sentences include modal information in terms of assertion, exclamation, interrogation, or injunction. And a verbless predicate, be it an adjective, a noun, an adverb, or a preposition. Intensifiers, big surprise, water surprise, markers of predication such as negative adverb or aspectual adverbs are evidence of a predicative use. These items are present in the verbless utterances of our corpus. So the question that is raised with predicative uses is the following. If the noun phrase is not referential, is it possible to associate it with either a stative interpretation or a source interpretation? In the majority of the cases, surprise used predicatively applies to a source. And the noun phrase is predicated of a state in 7 cases only. An example of this is it was a little bit of a surprise for him. For him, and he was totally shocked, are indications that surprise refers to a state about the subject rather than a situation. This example here is less clear. Is it, so it's got fruit and it's got spices and meat, complete surprise. Is it a surprising event each time it happens, or is the person who opens the fruit surprised each time that person opens it? The use of surprise without any additional information in exclamative sentences is difficult to interpret. Is it referential or predicative? Here, it seems to serve a predicative function, but it is difficult to determine in the absence of any additional information. So the question is, does the noun characterize the situation of utterance, or does it refer to the addressee's presumed or expected state of mind? Given that the overwhelming majority of the predicative uses were associated with a stimulus, with a source reading, we assume that the speaker refers to a surprise event. However, a state reading is not ruled out. The noun in that case, would intensify the expected surprise effect. And the function of exclamative sentences is to express strong emotions. An exclamative sentence may contribute to a surprise effect as part of a communicative intention. And now modifiers, complements and possessives also play a part in the interpretation of surprise in context. For example, to, my, to, his, to plus possessive plus surprise. The stative reading is beyond doubt. Reference is made to the experience, to the experiencer in the noun phrase. The same pattern exists for a series of emotion nouns, to my disappointment, to my delight, to my amazement, annoyance. The analysis of less canonical expressions, however, is more difficult. Twist, in the second example, suggests an event, but the possessive, his surprise, suggests a state. And the extended context does not allow us to determine which interpretation is the right one. Main suggests a source interpretation, but my, in my main surprise, suggests a stative one. But if you look at the preposition here, my main surprise on why he wanted to diminish his viewership by going there, on is a bit unusual, I think. After surprise, you would normally expect the preposition on after question, for example, a question, my question on. But after the noun surprise, it's a bit unusual, and I think that this preposition suggests here a stative interpretation. The significant collocations found in the COCA for main were entrance, drawback, etc. So to conclude on this, although the distinction between two meanings of surprise, surprise as a state versus surprise as a source, a stimulus, although this distinction accounts for the majority of the occurrences of the corpus, the fact that 65 occurrences are ambiguous shows that such a distinction might not be as clear-cut as suggested in the literature. And in section 4, we will suggest a hypothesis to account for that. So we'll come back to that later. Now let's move on to the adjective surprised and the verb surprise. Surprise as a verb is described in the literature as a verb of psychological state. Verbs of psychological state express a stimulus that affects an experiencer. In English, as in French, these verbs belong to different syntactic classes. Admire, for example, is an experiencer subject verb expressing the stimulus as the object. In contrast, surprise is a stimulus subject verb expressing the experiencer as the object. X surprised me. Let us first focus on the expression of the source of the stimulus in our data. In contrast to the psychological verb, X surprised me, the adjectival phrase, I am surprised, you are surprised, places the experiencer in the foreground, I, you are surprised, and tells little about the source. The source may appear as a complement in the form of a prepositional phrase, or which you have at that reaction, for example, or in the form of a complement clause. Are you surprised that you wound up here? When the adjectival phrase is not followed by a complement, the source is not explicit. However, contrary to happiness or sadness, which are purely emotive, surprise is created by something which is external to the speaker. I am surprised cannot be used without a situational or textual context that provides the source of the feeling. So even if the source is not explicit in the last series of examples here, I'm surprised, but there's no complement, so you don't know what the source is. It's not made explicit. Even if it is not explicit, you know that it is Maya's behavior that causes Paul's surprise in the first example, and in the second one, Paul's question is triggered by April's disbelief at what he has been telling her, and he wants to make sure that she's surprised by his narrative. In the present tense, the source is taken to be factual, both speaker and addressee having access to it. What is at stake is the nature of the speaker's or addressee's current emotive reaction, not the agent or event or object that may have caused that reaction. the factual character of the source is part of some knowledge that is shared by speaker and addressee, which explains why the source may remain implicit, may not be expressed at all. The distinction between source and state is not really an issue for the study of the adjective surprised. The use of the adjective surprised corresponds to a foregrounding of the speaker's or addressee's state. What is striking in our data is that the focus on the experiencer's state is not identical for first person and second person utterances. With I am surprised, the predicative adjective is generally followed by a complement. Only 2 occurrences of our sample do not have a complement. When the subject is you, however, the complement is absent in half of the cases. And I think that this difference corresponds to different pragmatic strategies. Interestingly, the divergence as to the mention of the source is correlated to a semantic dimension recently put forward in the literature as a manifestation. In a recent article devoted to the lexicon of surprise and disappointment in French, Novakova, Goossens, and Melnikova put forward 4 different criteria: intensity, aspect, causativity, and manifestation. They examine their contribution to the collocations of predicates denoting surprise and disappointment, in French verbs such as surprendre, étonner, décevoir, and the corresponding adjectives and nouns. And they show that there exists a systematic link between syntactic patterns and these semantic dimensions. While intensity, aspect, and causativity are not crucial for the study of the adjective surprised, manifestation accounts for the collocations expressing how the experiencer discloses his or her emotions and how these emotions can be perceived by others. And it is clearly a relevant parameter for interactions containing second-person utterances, since the pattern you plus copular verb, you sound surprised, you are surprised, is often used when the speaker tries to infer what the addressee is feeling from the speaker's gestural, facial, or prosodic features. In second-person utterances, the speaker has indirect access to emotions. Emotions are inferred. You don't know what the other really experiences. So emotions are not declared in this case. Moreover, manifestation is associated with a syntactic characteristic. Typically, there is no complement following the adjective. The results from the COCA corpus confirm this tendency. Only 21% of second-person utterances have a complement, and with the verb sound, you sound surprised, for example, the figures drop to 2.5%. In the example here, you sound surprised, the speaker attributes an emotion to the addressee, but at the same time, the speaker indirectly asks about the reason for him being surprised in a tentative statement using a modal evidential verb. So emotion attribution is interpreted here by Frances as an invitation to explain why she is surprised. And she goes on to explain why what happened totally contradicts her previous cognitive representations. This occurrence shows that the implicit character of the source of surprise is something that is salient. The focus on the experiences state is far from being neutral. In this case, it is part of the therapist's strategy to uncover the patient's feelings. Now, first-person utterances. In this case, the mention of the source also corresponds to pragmatic strategy. When the adjective is followed by a complement, and this is the most frequent case, 72% of the cases, the source appears to be contrary to the speaker's expectations, and the evaluative judgment that is formed about the source is generally negative. In this example, I'm surprised you do, elliptical you do stands for you remember. And the fact that the addressee remembers the term is unexpected, given that the speaker herself does not remember this term. To put it schematically, the speaker expects non-P, but is faced either with P or with a value different from P. So the emotive reaction caused by unexpectedness expresses the speaker's evaluation, and according both to logic and to the speaker's moral standards, what is actually the case should not be the case. So the study of source and state of surprise is relevant to the analysis of the adjective surprised, but only if pragmatic parameters are taken into account to explain the presence or absence of the source of surprise. Now, let's come back to surprise as a noun. In cognitive linguistics, metonymy is regarded as a conceptual phenomenon expressed linguistically. As Barcelona says, metonymy is a conceptual projection whereby one experiential domain, the target, is partially understood in terms of another experiential domain, the source, included in the same common experiential domain. This definition of metonymy implies that the stimulus meaning is a metonymic extension of the state meaning. This definition also helps to account for the link between the two meanings of surprise. And it predicts ambiguity in the semantic network of this noun. I have some problem with the sun. Excuse me. So, any semantic network has a prototype and meaning extensions. A prototype, according to Langacker, is a typical instance of a category, and other elements are assimilated to the category on the basis of their perceived resemblance to the prototype. There are degrees of membership based on degrees of similarity. Langacker only allows for metaphoric extension, but it has been suggested more recently that metonymic extensions are relevant as well. I'm sorry, I have difficulty. I can't read. Excuse me, could you help me? I can't see I thought it was because of the sun, but maybe there is something wrong. I can't see here on this. Okay, thank you. So recently, metonymy has been introduced as an important extension, and it has been added to metaphors. And there are several arguments in favor of a stimulus state analysis, the stimulus being the prototype, and the state being a metonymic extension, a source. And they serve to determine the direction of the metonymic relation between the two meanings of surprise. Well, not to prove its existence. The existence of this relation is something that we postulate. Now, if we come to the etymology of surprise, interestingly, it signals that the stimulus meaning is older than the stative meaning. It appeared at the end of the 14th century, and later on came the feeling caused by something unexpected. Radon and Koveches show that among the cognitive relations producing metonymy, cause may be found as a metonymy of effect, and effect as a metonymy of cause, but the latter is much more common than the former. In the case of surprise, the state of surprise, the effect, is a metonymy of the stimulus of the cause. It is difficult to determine whether state reading is the first one, because in our corpus it is more difficult to identify the experiencer than the nature of the stimulus. In this example, the first one, speed and violence of action are characteristics of an event, not of a state. Even if both occurrences of a surprise are eventually analyzed as stative, the identification of the experiencer remains unclear in this example. Are the operators afraid of being surprised, or do they want to make sure that the terrorists will be surprised? It's not clear at all. For some predicative uses in which no specific experiencer is mentioned, we decided to label the experiencer as a generic one. And surprise is thus generalized to the speaker, the addressee, and any potential audience. Note that our knowledge of the extralinguistic context influences our perception of a potential generic experiencer. In the second example, the leader of the free world pops in for a surprise lunch. Well, the leader in question is Obama, and surprise is general. If, as a teacher, I do a surprise quiz with my students, only my students will be surprised. A surprise lunch with Obama may have influence on the rest of the world, but my surprise quiz conforms with my students' expectations, as opposed to the rest of the world, on which my quiz will have absolutely no impact. So this has to do with the horizon of expectations in all these different cases. De Mendoza-Ibanez notes that metonymy is seldom used predicatively. It is usually associated with a referential use, and in the case of surprise, the stimulus meaning is the majority in predicative uses. The stative meaning is generally not associated with the predicative use. In his corpus study of the noun I, Hilpert shows that all the metonymic extensions of that word are part of recurrent patterns. In the case of surprise, it may be observed that fixed phrases, element of surprise, by surprise, make up the greatest proportion of the occurrences with stative meaning. The semantic network of surprise, with the stative meaning as a metonymy of the stimulus meaning, seems to be iconic of the surprise scenario. The stimulus prototype may be compared with the definition of a black swan event proposed by Taleb. It has to be outside the speaker's horizon of expectations, both culturally and historically. Now, we posit the existence of a cline between the stimulus prototypical meaning and its stative extension. It seems possible to account for the ambiguous meaning of surprise as a noun on the basis of the structure of its network, since the definition of the conceptual domain itself is ambiguous. As observed by Barcelona, it includes all the entrenched knowledge that a speaker has about an area of experience. Like the definition of the prototype, the definition of the conceptual domain is culturally marked, and it may vary from one speaker to another. This may blur the boundary not only between metaphor and metonymy, but also between prototypical meaning and its metonymic extension. This might explain, for example, why the noun surprised may be used with adjectives, why it may be used with adjectives which normally modify states as well as events. Our proposal is to place the different realizations of the noun surprise on a cline between stimulus, prototype, and state, that is the metonymic extension. In other words, it is not necessary to choose between the two interpretations. The semantic network of this noun is compatible with both of them. An implication of this analysis is that surprise is not a psychological noun in English, since the stative meaning is not its primary meaning. There is no clear dichotomy between the stimulus meaning and the stative meaning, and in context it is often impossible to distinguish between the two meanings. From the perspective of cognitive linguistics, the relation that is generally accepted between stimulus and state is reversed, and as a result, it is our claim that surprise is not a psychological noun. Now, the adjective. The way emotions are displayed and attributed to others is not neutral. Expressing emotions may be viewed as part of an argumentative strategy. Emotions, whether displayed, concealed, are meaningful. I fully agree with Plantin on this. We have pointed out that first-person utterances imply a source of surprise that may be either implicit or explicit, both speaker and addressee having access to that source. Second-person utterances, however, are generally not followed by a complement, and our contention is that this syntactic distribution is correlated to different pragmatic goals. In first-person utterances, the adjectival phrase may serve two pragmatic functions. It may be used to evaluate the source of surprise in a negative way, which amounts to blaming the addressee for it, and also to control discourse. I'm glad you're getting something here. Is highly ironic and understood as such. Let's not make a big deal of it. I'm surprised by how much effort you put into showing your contempt is an utterance that displays surprise in order to blame the addressee for showing a negative emotion, for showing contempt. By expressing surprise, the speaker indirectly rebukes the addressee for the emotions he shows and for the words he utters. Corollary of this negative evaluation is the speaker's attempt to control conversational interaction. Look at this example where I'm surprised and you're surprised occur several times. A shift here can be observed between I'm surprised you can suggest it to I'm surprised when you speak like that to your mother. In response to the addressee's exclamation, you're surprised. Here again, I think that Plantin is right when he says that the expression of emotions is affectively weighted, and a lot of affective load here is associated with I'm surprised. No, how you're surprised? How can you be surprised? And the first occurrence of I'm surprised has scope over a specific situation. The second one, however, I'm surprised when you speak like that to your mother, it has scope over an iterative situation. The source of surprise is then said to be not the content of Swaney's suggestion, but the way she speaks to her mother. And this shift indicates that here, Asta is in full control of conversational interaction, which is corroborated by the preceding narrative sentence where we have Asta was cool and calm. Second person utterances correspond either to a question aiming at confirming the speaker's assessment of the addressee's emotional state, or a tentative statement regarding the addressee's emotional state. And in both cases, the speaker tries to attribute and label an emotion that the addressee has not clearly acknowledged in his or her discourse. And this attempt represents an intrusion. You sound surprised represents an intrusion into the addressee's private feelings, and it is a strategy to make the other verbalize and explicitly acknowledge what had so far been left unexpressed. As with first-person utterances, what is at stake is how emotions are used within a specific argumentative strategy. Well, similarly, in other verbal exchanges, attributing surprise is linked to a negative judgment and serves as a kind of exposure that destabilizes the experiencer. To conclude, the surprise lexicon is currently being investigated from a semantic and syntactic viewpoint. Novakova and colleagues have provided evidence that correlations exist between syntactic patterns and semantic dimensions, and we hope to have shown that a pragmatic analysis of verbal interaction allows establishing correlations between semantic patterns and discourse strategies. Surprise lexemes do not primarily convey surprise, but may be exploited pragmatically within complex argumentative strategies. And I think that this confirms the need to distinguish between emotional communication and emotive communication. In the case of the adjective surprised, two strategies are at work: expressing reproach in an indirect way or attempting to control conversation. And to conclude my conclusion, I started with a few words on Mirativity and left this issue aside. Well, it is clear that lexemes such as surprised as a noun or surprised as an adjective are not related to Mirativity. So what makes things difficult for the linguist is that words which spontaneously are associated with surprise, like surprise and surprised, being surprised, are not those that genuinely express emotional reactions. And in order to carry out a linguistic study of surprise, we constantly have to look at two different directions. Lexemes involving surprise, which are used in an argumentative way, in a pragmatic way, and spontaneous reactions which do express surprise, which are not controlled. And the next step is, encoding the two dimensions and try and see how they might correlate, they might be correlated to each other. But we need to encode our data, to annotate the corpus in order to see whether this correlation exists or whether there is no correlation at all. Thank you for your attention.